9 years after the first Crew came around, and we finally got a third game rolling out after a long 5-year run of the Crew 2. While I did play the Crew 1 3 times for the story, the Crew 2 is where I'm lacking experience. I've only played it a little bit back in 2018. I don't like the removal of its story, the oversimplification of several mechanics, and more push towards grindy live service experience. So you probably wouldn't see a video on that game. I know I'm mainly known as the guy who covers old racing games, but Motorfest is a very peculiar example. For one, it is essentially a continuation of the Crew, taking place not in the mainland USA, but Hawaii, specifically Oahu. The exact same island as TDU1 by devs formerly part of Eden Games for Set Games development. Plus, hearing a lot of things about the beta got me pretty curious. The one thing led to another, and now you're watching this video. It's a bit of a rarity for me to do reviews of recently released games, but I'd like to mix things up every now and then. I've pretty much done the same with Need for Speed Unbound, and you'll probably be seeing another one with TDU Solar Crown. But enough chit chat. Time to see if Ubisoft can finally make something great out of this. Main menu is certainly basic, simple text with mostly cinematics taking up the screen. I'm assuming this cinematic will get switched out with future updates. And once we do get in, we are treated to an intro, showcasing the island and vehicles we can drive from the usual cars, bikes, and even some unusual options like the F1 cars and a Toyota. With some modern Ubisoft writing sprinkled on top and an option to pick one zoomer icon who will be representing us, alongside a very similar character customization as in Forza Horizon. For enduring all of this, we get our first collection of races as a taste of what's to come in the playlist events. So it's pretty interesting so far, but I do have one major pet peeve with the physics. For anyone thinking this game is the Forza Horizon killer, the physics will be the make or break. While I can agree the atmosphere is somewhat similar, the physics will truly determine whether you'd prefer Forza or this. If you prefer more sim controls, then go stick to Forza. Otherwise, this game is gonna satisfy the arcade racer, with the super grippy, easy sliding, and every vehicle having nitrous. So with the addition of permanent nitrous and a very arcadey physics, there will be discrepancies to the style of driving and difficulties experienced in Forza Horizon, which uniquely enough is separated by 2 layers. The first one being the same as Forza's adjustable difficulty options to set things like assists, but there's also the second layer being the event difficulty being a simple 1 to 5 slider. They even got the same annoying difficulty increase message. But a bit of warning, never set it to the highest on a first try because you won't be using your own ride, making most of these races impossible to get first place on. After we're done with the whole intro, they finally gave us an option of 3 cars to start with, a BMW, Honda, or Mustang. It's a pretty interesting choice, especially considering the generational gaps between and the cars being convertibles. Just as advertised, Motorfest has somewhere around 600 cars from a bunch of brands, with most of the cars being transferable from the Crew 2. So if you're someone who has been grinding the stuff out of that game, then you won't really have to grind for most of the cars. But this does bring its own set of problems, which comes from its tuning. So the good old loot box Fiesta tuning part from the Crew 2 has returned, except in their effort to completely balance PvP, Ubisoft has essentially nerfed any of the upgrade mechanics for said piece of content. Every car used for PvP will be set to max, regardless of what tuning is set for your car. While there are some events that seem to not have this balancing, it makes upgrading feel pointless for the most part. But what about the other vehicles? Bikes can be fun for some races, although they don't really feel that much different from the cars. Planes are quite useful until you get the fast travel unlocked, and boats? Why even? I get this is a Hawaiian island, but you don't really need to do any boating stuff outside of the playlists. For visual customization, well, it's pretty much as expected since we got the wide body kits from Liberty Walks, and then there's the livery editor, which is pretty much the same for the most part as other racing games. But either way, for my starter car, I decided to pick the Honda S2K.
Hello driver, I'm Kara. Let me assist you in choosing a playlist. Made in Japan.
If you're wondering if that cut was from me, nah, that was the game's weird cut. But anyways, this also introduces us to Kara, the AI assistant.
Discover, explore and photograph the hidden playlist in our category.
The Bluetooth device is ready to...
Look, let's find some distraction with the other features. And what else would be better than the main highlight of the playlists? Each playlist focuses on different aspects and gimmicks in Motorfest, each having cinematics and vibes to help differentiate from one another. with stuff like the Liberty Walk playlist having you run races in Liberty Walk tuned cars. The Motorsport playlist had several unique cars and tire degradation as a mechanic. The Porsche playlist made specifically to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Porsches, taking you through their historical cars to appreciate these beautiful beasts, with the gimmick of this playlist being bonus money from clean driving. There's also the Donut Media playlist being the one with the most variety, and some others like the Made in Japan playlist, which is just racing in Japanese cars and that's it. Beating an entire playlist grants free vehicles, usually based on the theme of the playlist, but there are a whole lot of problems. The first one being the dialogue. If you think Kara is annoying enough, then I can guarantee one of these playlists will push you to completely mute all the dialogue in this game. While I don't mind having some dialogue mid-race, a lot of them are just too annoying to deal with. Why can't we just have some writing in a racing game that at least got some weight into it? Because a lot of these are just pointless noises. At best, they are completely nothing, but at worst, they are straight up distracting and grating to hear. But fine, I will happily admit these dialogues are not exactly important issues, and that this is highly likely just my subjective taste rejecting the cringe. Next problem is the constant forcing to use loaned cars in every race. While there are some races requiring you to use your own cars, 90% of the time for a first run, you'll be forced to run in a preset loaned car by the game, making you think, what is the purpose of buying a starter car if you're not gonna even use it in any of these playlists? And then there's the lack of foresight coming from the developers. Anyone looking at the name would probably think this game is designed mostly for co-op or multiplayer sessions. I mean, the game is called The Crew after all, but surprisingly enough, a lot of the playlist does not consider the possibility of players running events in co-op mode. Majority of the Donut Media playlists are designed strictly for single player, with most of the races being a 1v1 turning into a 2v1 scenario, or in the case of the cone game, the game will count both you and your friends' hit cones together instead of counting them separately. So somehow we went from the crew in the crew being optional to the crew consists of me and only me. I get that a lot of players are solo players, but you'd think being the devs of the crew, they'd think of something to acknowledge the players running the game in, well, a crew. But nonetheless, let's talk about something very serious: the terrible playlist balancing. What's so bad about this, you may ask? Well, if I were to make you think of any tournament styles in any other racing game, you'll probably think of 3 to 5 races. So with that in mind, imagine my surprise when every single playlist in Motorfest contains around 7 to 11 races, with each race taking up between 5 or 15 minutes. In other words, one whole playlist will take you around an hour of completion to beat, which makes it worse when they log basic features behind the playlist completions. For example, you cannot claim any of the prizes from leveling up until you beat a total of 3 playlists, and then the biggest one being fast travel being logged behind 10 total playlist completion, which is going to take around 10 hours to beat. I understand the map is much smaller than TDU1's version of Oahu, and you can somewhat fast travel between each playlist starting point, but locking fast travel that deep is quite frustrating. There's a very good reason why TDU or Forza Horizon allows fast travel anywhere as long as you've discovered the road, because those developers understood most players just want to get to the meat of the action as quickly as possible, and constantly repeating maps makes the world feel absurdly smaller than we thought and completely breaks the immersion. But speaking of which, how is this version of Oahu? Let's start from the center of the map, the festival grounds. We can actually walk around in the showroom area. This area seems to showcase players' custom tunes based on whichever featured playlist is being focused on for the week. Not gonna lie, this is pretty cool. It's kind of what I expected out of something like TDU. For the rest of the map, while this is technically Oahu, it's not the same as the one we remember in TDU. We sure as hell didn't have these sick loops in Oahu back then. The island itself is much smaller. Every fence and tree has become brittle and the roads are very wide. But I guess that's a necessary evil for an arcade game, though they don't have much incentive to explore the map, with it mostly being hidden collectibles and the minor event on the road. Most of your time will be spent on driving from one playlist event to another. While the map is smaller compared to the TDU version, it's likely you'll already drive through repeat roads of the map just by clearing playlists. Doesn't help that this game seems to want to be Forza Horizon, when it would benefit a lot more by being an equal mix of both Horizon and Test Drive Unlimited. They already got the tech to have human character controls for the festival grounds showroom. The only thing left is to add some housing or car showrooms where we can walk in and hang out with friends. And boom, suddenly the map feels bigger and more populated than what it really is. Plus, I'd give even more reason for why character creation is in the game. But if Ubisoft aren't gonna make that a thing, then we should probably probably discuss the other game modes they got, because the playlists will get pretty old quickly. Battle Royale. Probably the only car-based battle royale to follow closely to the original idea, as it is straight up a demolition derby. You go down to the field as a plane and pretty much just smash each other, with pickups being buffs to health and damage with a bunch of obstacles. This game mode is where the game's damage model really shines, since these demo derby cars are made for smashing. But otherwise, I guess it's a pretty unique take to a car-based battle royale, which comes with its own set of problems. For one, since this is now turned into a game of smash or be smashed, people can just gang up on a single guy and get rid of him. Plus, it tends to just be a game of who can T-bone the other players first. Of course, you can probably counter that by upgrading to a monster truck first. Well, if you can get it first. The result is a much more chaotic experience than what you would experience from Forza's Eliminator, but it's generally a nice mix-up from the usual races, though due to its more frantic and chaotic nature, you'll either really love or despise this game mode every round. Probably the very best thing this game has, a 28-player PvP, with different cars and disciplines. You'll be switching between 3 different disciplines throughout the event. You can use your own car or use the one given by the game. The PI levels will be auto-balanced though, so don't even think of using an overpowered tune. You'll switch between cars mid-race, and if there's one thing this game mode's got going, it is a complete clusterfuck. Near the start, everyone will be crashing onto each other, and for the rest, it'll be a pretty interesting race between you and the other remaining racers. And this race is super long, since it spans throughout the whole island. With 28 racers and a ton of track, this game mode is quite chaotic and frantic as well. But unlike the Battle Royale mode, this one actually requires more skill than luck due to it being straight racing, which makes it one of the funnest experiences you can get in this game so far. But as expected, there will be a lot of ramming, broken hearts, and grudges. So this is basically heaven for Forza players. And if it's not gonna be the rammers screwing you, it'll be the game's weird physics.
Here he comes.
The car just flips very easily. It's super detrimental in off-road races, and this game is just allergic to gravity in a nutshell. It feels like they immediately pull you back to the ground anytime you get any airtime, a bit like how it was in TDU2. And this won't be the only problem the game has stuck to its core. There's also the performance issue and a lot of the UI clutter. The performance is pretty bad with some FPS drops, but it gets much worse when playing with a crew or a group of friends. It's funny to see a game called the Crew Motorfest make it unplayable when played with a crew. And just look at the problems: crew disconnecting, booted off races, friend list being empty. Considering this is all recorded when the game got released, a lot of these issues will probably be ironed out in the coming weeks. And there are other things I would perceive as problems, such as the Legend Point passive buffs. These buffs are permanent and yet seem to have quite massive effects on gameplay, which seem to allow heavy grinders or long-time players to easily beat new players, doing the difficulty scaling to one side completely. But in case I'm wrong and all of this feature is disabled for PvP, go ahead and correct me in the comments below. The Crew Motorfest is pretty much what would be expected out of Ubisoft's modern live service titles. It can be fun under certain conditions, but a lot of this game is baked with badly designed gameplay and choices. For example, what's the goal of this game? Pretty much nothing. You need to invent your own goals, either it be by car collecting, PvP dominance, or just beating all the playlists. And it's indicative of modern gaming issues. There's just no purpose. Upgrades are unnecessary, playlists are extremely grindy, basic features are locked behind said long and grindy playlists, AI difficulties are insane with rubber bands, and the grind is pretty steep for newcomers, unless these newcomers are willing to shell out some money to alleviate that grind. Stuff like the grand races can be fun and full of suspense, but it's predicted on the whole no options issue. If you like the Crew 2, you'll probably like this game. If you want to try something like Forza Horizon with a different flavor, you'll probably like this game. But as this game stands, I really have no good reason to care. This won't really dissuade me from covering any newer titles though. I'm still somewhat curious about something like TDU's Solar Crown, so look out for that in the near future when it comes out. In the end, this is a game I would absolutely ask people to avoid until it drops in price massively. Ubisoft trying to double dip so hard with a $70 price tag for an online-only live service game littered to the brim with microtransactions is just scummy all around. But it's to be expected expected from Ubisoft. So here's my final comparison with Forza Horizon. Even though that game is going to cost $60 to $70 as well, at the very least you can still play Horizon offline without any internet connection, which ultimately means as long as you own the game, even after the servers go down, you'll still be able to play Horizon. Just look at Forza Horizon 1 and 2, which recently got their servers shut down. You can still play those games even after the fact, and it allows these games to be preserved via methods of emulation. The Crew trilogy won't have the same treatment once the servers go down, but if you want to check out a decent Crew game, you can check out this video talking about how well the Crew 1 has aged in the past 9 years. This whole thing was recorded in the Ultimate Edition, and yes, I did spend $100 for early access, so if you want to make this bad financial decision worth it, drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.
Made in Japan, Hawaii's scenic tour. Discover extraordinary.
Be gone, wench.